Barry Morphew had it all. A millionaire's golden crown. Big house in the Rockies, king of a small town. But darkness brewed in his heart, a secret cold as stone. Suzanne went missing, her fate he would never own. In a shallow grave marked by one lone tree under Colorado stars, where no one would see, with a shovel and lies he buried his sin. But the truth has a way of creeping back in. Oh, Barry, you ran to Cave Creek, Arizona, hiding in a biker bar, waiting for your secret bust. From riches to ruins, a trailer park thrown. Now you're locked in a cage, forever alone. He fled to Arizona.
Hey everybody, I was just talking and I was not on the desktop so you can hear me. So I apologize. Hope everybody is doing well today. Requiem, great to see you. Sweet Pea, good morning from freezing Florida. Did you get snow, Sweet Pea? Or I'm sorry, Sweetie Pie. Was there actually snow? Hey, Melissa, good to see you. Kelly, welcome. Kathy R, good to see you. Zelda, my friend. I hope you're on the mend. Let's see. Requiem says, good morning, everyone. Please pull up, have a listen, participate in chat, but do not forget to give the thumbs up and please subscribe before you leave. All right. Let's see. No, but 12 degrees. That is ludicrous. It's insanity. Okay. I will tell you this, Sweetie Pie. I was at Disney World one time with my kids, and it actually snowed during the Spectro Magic parade. So it was very cold. And they had been saying that it might snow, yada, yada. And everybody's like, no, not going to snow, not going to snow. We were all layering sweatshirts because who thinks you're going to go to Orlando and have snow, right? Nobody. So there were no sweatshirts left in any of the shops or anything like that. And we were sitting there front, like on the curb front, watching the Spectromagic parade. And literally it began to snow. So I have video. I should upload it and show y'all. And it was big snowflakes, like it was real snow. So that was a very cool, kind of unique, memory moment in my history. So yeah, but 12 degrees, that is brutal. Very, very sorry to hear about that. Have you had any dropping iguanas? Yeah, the iguanas get cold and then they just freeze up and fall over, like those goats from Tennessee. Or is it Kentucky? It's Kentucky stiff legs, right? I don't remember. But yeah, those goats that have blood pressure problems. Okay. Oh, was it 1989? Oh, let me think a minute. Could it have been that long ago? I had my son and my little niece was with me. Maybe it was. Well, because that would have been maybe. I'll look. I've got the video. It'll have the date, the timestamp will be marked on the video. and I'll upload it and show y'all, but it was very beautiful and exciting, and everybody was thrilled, about the falling snow. I don't remember if that was the same trip that we saw the shuttle take off. No, the shuttle launch was much later because I had my daughter with me. My daughter's 10 years younger than my son. So that wouldn't have been 89. For some reason, I want to think it was like in 95, because that would have been like Egypt. I don't know. I have to look it up and give it to y'all. Think it was when I was in Italy, but hubby was there. Oh, were you in the Navy? Very cool. Very cool. Requiem was a senior in high school. One night we go out to dinner, got blown into Cheesecake Factory. Yeah, I'm going to tell you something about Cheesecake Factory too. Cheesecake Factory has the bomb cheesecakes. I don't like their food. Their food is really not very good. But hey, they're not the main meal factory. They're the Cheesecake Factory. So, okay. So this whole thing with Barry Morphew and shame and, all of that. So John Matthias did a video where he talked about shame being the problem with Nick Reiner, and Nick Reiner acting out on his family, specifically murdering his mom and dad. I have taken issue with that. I do know this, okay? So there's a researcher named Gilligan, James Gilligan, who he says that shame is probably the primary motivator for violence, and it is nearly always at the foundation when there is rage. And when, I keep thinking about Brian Kohberger, and now that we have these photographs from the crime scene, it's very clear. There's a couple of things that are very clear with these photos from the crime scene. One is, I don't think the prosecutors got it right. Who believes that the prosecutors had the right story when it came to Brian Kohberger? If you think they told the right story, put a 1. If you think they missed the mark completely based on the evidence, put a 2. That is very curious. What do y'all think? Because I think, my opinion, and I'm not going to show the pictures. We're not going to get into the blood and gore on this channel. That is not what I do here. And I'm not going to do that at all. I think they got it wrong. I don't think the story was as they said, as they told, right? There was some real indication that it was a chaotic, violent, loud, possibly even rather extended attack, correct? And I'm not going to go into the photographs. Like I said, that is not what I want to be a part of. But rage, when you look at the photographs, that's the takeaway. There was rage that night in that house with 3 little girls and a young man. What in the world could have prompted that level of rage, correct? And if we go back to James Gilligan, who is very clear to say that shame is nearly always at the heart of violence, and absolutely shame is the cause of rage, right? So you can have violence without rage, which brings me to Barry Morphew, okay? Now, Barry Morphew is considered innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. and he has not been proven guilty in a court of law. I did go to the preliminary hearing for when he was arrested previously. Look, from what I heard of the evidence during the preliminary hearing a couple of years ago, I do think they got the right guy. Now, there has to be a trial. There's new evidence. There's been a grand jury. I think there was a grand jury. Yeah, there was a grand jury because they took up the issue of the BAM, the medication. So yes, innocent until proven guilty. Yes. And I don't want to manipulate any potential jury. I don't want to do that. But I have seen and heard evidence that was presented previously, even the evidence that was ultimately thrown out because Linda Stanley and her office were incompetent, like a YouTube creator we know. And so when I think about this issue of shame as laid out by John Matthias related to Nick Reiner, as I think about this issue of shame and the information that we have on violence and violent crime and that kind of thing, I go back to Barry and I think, where's the rage? Is there rage there with as the story is told, what we've been presented in the arrest affidavit? Is rage at the heart of what Barry did? Because if you see rage, according to James Gilligan, if you see rage, if you see evidence of rage, there's going to be some shame involved. James Gilligan says that's a certainty. It's not a certainty in all violence. There can be violence, for example, if someone has hunger. If somebody is hungry and haven't eaten, or their children are starving, they may very well get violent, not gratuitous violence, but violence with the stated goal of, I need to collect food, I need to procure food to feed my little kids, right? So violence can occur without rage. But when there's rage, you're almost certainly dealing with shame. And so I thought about Barry. Brian Kohberger, I see evidence of rage in the pictures. And I think, I can see there's so many opportunities for rage with Brian Kohberger's history. So many opportunities for moments of intense shame. For example, when he was invited to leave the bar because the women there said, hey, he's creepy. He is making me feel uncomfortable, like Lauren Matthias. I feel unsafe. Okay. So yeah, Brian Kohberger made people feel unsafe. That led to circumstances where I feel that it would have made sense if he felt a moment of shame. Maybe one of these girls, or even Ethan, or just fraternity people in general, maybe someone humiliated Brian Kohberger. And all those years of pent up shame and embarrassment, he also had the problems with the faculty, that he was not performing adequately in his teaching assistantship. He knew that he was about to lose that, which was basically a job. It was paying him. And so there's shame, right? And at the heart of rage is shame. So I could see that with Brian Kohberger. I was comfortable with that. I could accept that might be a good explanation. Then I go back to Barry Morphew, because Barry Morphew, the disappearance of Suzanne, that's the case that really touched an emotional nerve for me. I think when families are living a life where all of their needs are met, there's plenty of food, financial resources, there's hobbies, there's opportunity for spiritual growth, all those things that we know create a healthy, happy quality of living. everything's in place, and yet this woman ends up missing, ultimately dead, in a neighborhood with multi-million-dollar houses with acres between them and no threat. She's not living a lifestyle that would be considered like dangerous or high risk. What in the world? How could this have possibly happened? Salida is a beautiful area. Very few people in the area. The properties have lots of space in between them. People don't go missing in Salida, Poncha Springs. People don't go missing from Buena Vista. People don't go missing from places like that unless there's something else at play. So I thought, was there evidence of rage where Barry Morphew is concerned? Because I've always thought, based on the interview that Gray Hughes did with the guy that ran for mayor of Indianapolis, I've always said that was shame to me. That was rage. The description that he gave where he had a disagreement with Barry, and Barry twisted off and he was sobbing as he's cussing and yelling and throwing clumps of dirt and throwing shovels. That was rage. That was shame, right? So I would think that for Barry, I would think that there would be a history of shame, that he's raised in a way that he's the young prince. If Chris McDonough, if Karen McDonough and their reporting is accurate, he was raised in a family where he was sort of the embodiment of family hope, right? That Barry was this gifted athlete and he was going to go on and make big where the dad had failed, right? So then he does do really well. He gets signed with the Toronto Blue Jays and really wasn't there at the farming camp or league very long before he ended up hurting his knee, and it basically ended his career. And what happens to people when they've lived 20, 25 years being told this is what you're going to do, this is what you're going to be, and you're believing it. You're believing that it's true. And then you wake up one day and the doctor walks in and says, yeah, well, you've played your last baseball game. Bye. They're crushed. These people are crushed. And then they have to pick up the pieces and figure out a way to move forward. So I do think that, Barry had a lot of, he definitely had one huge loss that I believe that shame probably would have been a big part of. And then I think about, well, was he shamed when he found out that Suzanne was having an affair? Was shame when he found out that Suzanne was messing around with someone and it might be someone from their hometown? Would he have looked at that as, here's one more public proclamation that I'm a failure? Like, I failed at baseball, my business failed, now I failed at being a family man, my wife is screwing around with somebody from high school, right? So I don't know. I don't think, okay, as the evidence is, as we see it, like as what has been presented, I don't really see the rage. The house, there was no evidence of rage in that house. The dogs, cadaver dogs, bloodhounds, they didn't find no stress. They didn't find any evidence that something like a big fight went down at the house. But you see, Barry would have known that about the dogs. He would have been aware that they could bring those dogs in to see if there had been a fight, that it's not just cadaver dogs, that there's tracking dogs, cadaver, bloodhounds. They could have brought a dog in just to see, hey, did something happen? Like at Chris Watt's house, the dog that kept hitting downstairs in the basement. It wasn't a cadaver dog. That was a dog that picks up on emotional distress, the pheromones that the body puts out in fear or in anger. It's interesting that it was at the bottom of the basement stairs, right? So is that why he used the BAM, or allegedly? Is that why the BAM was used? Because basically you just, jab with the needle and then you wait 5 minutes and then she is completely relaxed and out of it. Then he loads her up in the truck and does the dirty deed somewhere else. Yes, Sweetie Pie, she had been in an ongoing affair with a boy from high school. His name is Jeff Libler from the Chicago area. And he was in Suzanne's class in high school. Barry knew it. In fact, Barry chased Jeff Libler around the golf course when they were in high school. He was going to beat Jeff Libler up because Suzanne and Jeff had gotten together at a high school party one night while Barry was off out of town. So we do believe that he knew that the affair partner was someone named Jeff, but there's suggestion that he didn't really know exactly who that was, because if we assume that all of the friend requests that he sent in Suzanne's name to Facebook, there were like 7 people named Jeff in this group of men. It was all men. There were no requests made to friend women. They were all men, and a large percentage of them were named Jeff. So, so maybe, right? Maybe he was ashamed with the affair. No concern that he himself had been having at least one affair. But according to Suzanne and her best friend, he'd been having affairs since before they left Indiana. So it was okay for him to have the affairs, but it was a whole different ballgame when it was the wife, because it was not about love. It's not about companionship. Barry would leave that house for days at a time. He was going up into Salida and staying at Shoho's house. He even brought in these big giant rocks and put in her front yard. Like, he wasn't making any attempt. My calculus, it didn't look like he was really making much of an attempt to hide this relationship with Shoshona. But then he finds out she's having an affair, and now all of a sudden he's going to get weird and murder her. It's weird, right? So maybe with Barry Morphew, maybe it was shame. Maybe he didn't care much about the authenticity of the love relationship between he and Suzanne. Maybe he didn't much care if he was having affairs. He didn't really want to spend time with Suzanne. They weren't really getting along, but they never called each other. It was a rare occurrence for there to even be like a 5-word text to one another. This relationship, over. It was finished. It was a done deal before all the drama started. But then maybe, just maybe, the discovery of Suzanne's affair, maybe that was shame. Maybe that was, oh my God, she's been having an affair with someone from our hometown, and once again, I'm going to look like Barry the schmuck. Right? So I don't know. There's been, Barry had some money issues, but he also the evidence is that he seemed to have a real talent for getting money quickly. Like he could be down to no money, everybody's suing him, and then he turns around and suddenly comes into $100,000-$200,000. So he's some way or another he was he could get money easily. I think that is interesting. I think that's another story. And I sure do wish somebody would investigate his business friends, because that seems weird. You don't just walk up and just say, oh, look, I need 100,000. Let me go mow a few lawns. That is not how it works. So, but he did seem to have that capability. So maybe it will turn out during the trial of Barry, maybe we will begin to see where there was some shame. He did not act like he had shame. Like when you read the interviews between he and Grusing, the FBI agent, when you read the arrest affidavit, the way he was answering questions, he didn't seem to have shame. That wasn't it. He almost seemed self-righteous, kind of like Nick. He was almost self-righteous. He said, he actually, Barry, you blamed God for the murder of Suzanne Morphew. You literally told Agent Grusing that God killed Suzanne because she had an affair. Barry, don't worry, Barry. You're not ever going to get to see the pearly gates. That ain't the direction you're going, buddy. So I don't know. I think this is an interesting thought. If shame is sufficient to cause a murder, right? I think that is I think it's a really interesting concept. And even though we didn't see any evidence of shame where Barry Morphew is concerned, I could speculate that finding out that your wife is having an affair, even though you're doing it, but people finding out that she's having an affair, the people in your hometown, once again, looking at Barry, the failure, could that be sufficient? Would that be sufficient to create uncontrolled rage? But again, I just don't feel like if he is the one who killed Suzanne, was it rageful? It was so methodical, right? Whoever did this, whoever killed Suzanne, it was very methodical. And this we're sure of. Now, let me say this too. John, who's the guy that does, he was a profiler? John Kelly. John Kelly is not of the belief that Barry Morphew killed his wife. So, mods, if we could get the link to John Kelly's channel so that everybody can go and look at his opinion on what happened to Suzanne Morphew. So the opposite, the competing narrative is John Kelly, who was a profiler. He believes that there's a serial killer in Colorado, most notably around Colorado Springs. And Salida is probably, he said 2.5 hours, but John, I'm not sure. If I remember, I think it takes about 3 hours, maybe 3 hours, 15 minutes to get from Colorado Springs to Salida. And one of the reasons for that, John, is because that road that goes through there, well, you're on the scenic route. Okay. It is incredibly beautiful. Like hands down, easily the most beautiful drive anywhere in the United States. The only other place I've seen more beautiful was in the Swiss Alps. Okay. For US, this is the prettiest drive ever. So it is gorgeous. You see bison, there's loads of bighorn deer, that elk. It's incredible. It's like a 2-3 hour drive through a National Geographic. Okay. So even though the map may say 2.5 hours, very small road, it's 2-lane, windy, right? It just winding here and there. So yeah, big farm. There's big farms in that area, big beef cattle farms, bison, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's probably more like a 3.5 hour drive from Salida to Colorado Springs. And then you also have that problem where her body was found in a different location than Salida. It was found about an hour south of Salida. Well, but to get to that area, you would have to go back up to Salida 1 hour and then back down toward Colorado Springs, which then brings you to a 4.5 hour drive because of the mountains that are in the way. So John Kelly does believe that there is a serial killer, and there are multiple women that have gone missing in the Colorado Springs area. Some of them I've already talked about. I talked about the young woman that went missing in Crestone. So I wanted you to I wanted to be able to state my opinions, my thoughts, but then I wanted to give you an opposing thought where Barry Morphew would be, found innocent of the murder of Suzanne. So you're fully covered either way. He was just worried about himself and how to continue financing his lifestyle. I want to call him derogatory words, but alas, I shall refrain. Shannon. Yeah. Here's the one of the things that has just bugged me, right? I think most of us that really know the case, most of us feel like if he's the one that did it, it was definitely done for financial reasons. Okay. But that still doesn't make a killer, does it? If you're about to be completely homeless, are you going to go out and murder someone? There's lots of people that end up with no money and no job, and they don't start killing people. So yeah, maybe that's the source of shame, Shannon. Maybe the source of shame was, if I end up broke with no seed money to start a new company or whatever, then my hometown is going to look at me like the ultimate failure. No baseball, my businesses went to shit, and I lost all my money. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Suzanne's living it up, down in the Highlands with her $400,000 in the bank. So so maybe that was the source of shame, Shannon. Knowing that Suzanne was going to make out like a bandit, she's going to walk away with this whole thing with plenty of cash, and Barry would have nothing. But then ultimately, what ended up happening to Barry? He ends up with nothing. He ends up a bigger loss in that he has no money. He has no job. He has no wife. He has no reputation. And he's standing trial for murder. Which brings us to my last point. Shame is one of those 7 deadlies, right? 7 deadly sins. Shame is one of those deadly sins because it begets rage. And bad things happen when people are rageful. What do you do if you're embarrassed and ashamed? Like, what are you supposed to do with that? How are you supposed to manage it? Well, one of the most effective things that we know is teaching yourself to have compassion, to be kind to yourself, to parent yourself as you would your own child. Be gentle with your judgments against yourself. If you're living with a source of shame, shame is not an indication that you failed. Shame is an indication that you have set standards for yourself to define yourself that are not realistic. For example, Barry, the only way Barry could be considered worthwhile was if he was a Major League Baseball player. And when he failed that because he broke his knee, then he was filled with failure. He was filled with a sense of shame, right? Here's a different way to think about it. What about like if one of your friends has this great job and they're making all this money and life is great, and then they get fired. They get fired and they're saying, oh, I'm so sad and I'll never be able to rebuild my life. And this is the worst thing ever in the world. I'm a loser, right? What are you going to do? You're going to sit there and go, wow, well, you should have gotten up and gone to work earlier. You should have worked weekends. You should have stayed at the office till 10 o'clock at night. You remember that math mistake you made on your spreadsheet? You made that. You should have, woulda, shoulda. You going to talk to your friend that way? Hell no, you're not. You're going to be supportive to your friend. You're going to say to your friend, I'm sorry. I know you feel so bad. This is awful. I got fired once. Why don't we go to the beach for the day? Let's just get away from all this for a little while and we will develop some perspective. And you know what? I actually think you getting fired is actually going to end up being a blessing. I think this is going to give you the push that you've needed to get out there and do better. This is going to be great. Now you have all this time to go and look for your dream job. You've always wanted to work in Paris. Now's the opportunity. That company did you a favor by firing you. Get your resume together. I will go with you to Paris while you do job interviews. This is going to be super. This is going to be your finest moment. That's what you do for a friend, isn't it? But when we get fired, when we get left behind by a spouse, when we're the ones that mess up and end up with no money, then we just sit around and tell ourselves, you're stupid, you're dumb, you're a failure. Nobody else would make these mistakes. You just don't know what you're doing. You're a mess. We're our own worst critic. 9 times out of 10, we are our own worst critics. The best, and then that brings shame, right? That brings to home that idea that you're not sad about losing a job that you liked. You're looking at the lost job as symbolic for what a failure you are as a human being. But that's inaccurate. Maybe they just needed to absorb the job because you were the highest paid person there and the economy sucks right now. Maybe getting fired had nothing to do with you and your quality of work. But we don't tell ourselves that. So when there is shame, Lauren Matthias, because you asked your husband this question and he had no answer for you. Let me play this. Hold on. Right here. All right.
In chapter 2 of this book, Wormser has a chapter called Shame, the Bad Companion of Narcissism. And that's interesting. But I want to read Wormser's description of shame because I think it's helpful. So, shame is the feeling when one is looked at with scorn. It is, in other words, the affect of contempt directed against the self, by others or by one's own conscience. Contempt says, quote, You should disappear as such a being as you have shown yourself to be, failing, weak, flawed, and dirty. Get out of my sight. Disappear, unquote. One feels ashamed for being exposed as one who has acted in a way that reflects poorly upon oneself by treachery, by bedwetting, by being a tattletale, by having failed in school or life. In short, of failing someone else's expectations or failing the demands of performance by one's own conscience, standing under the glare of one's own mind's eye. To disappear into nothing is the punishment for such failure. There is a particular significance of seeing and being looked at, that is, of exposure in shame.
To be the talk of the town.
That's powerful. I do have questions. I know that you need to keep moving on, and we're talking about the Reiner case, but if shame keeps us from trying, because that was really interesting to learn just now. It can. If shame can keep us from trying, how do you overcome that?
Well, that's the problem, right?
Now, John Matthias is the great Wizard of Oz, right? He's going to have a profound answer that, if one of his many tens of thousands of patients is dealing with shame, how do you help them? What do you do for them?
That's the problem that Nick confronts. That's the problem that Rob confronted. I mean, Rob overcame it. If you go back to Rob, he didn't overcome it until he was 40. And the way he overcame it was he kept trying, and he was apparently able to deal with failure to some degree. I mean, I don't know exactly his failure.
No, when he was 40, his dad said, "Good job." Self-affirming. You yourself said that he's been in therapy nonstop for how long? No, if Rob overcame that critical element of shame when it comes to performance based on his father having unrealistic expectations of him, that still doesn't answer your wife's question. How do you overcome this deep-seated shame? How do you heal from that? And you said he just kept trying. Just keep swimming, swimming. Come on, John, you know this answer.
Failures, but
He had critics.
He had critics, right? He was able to adapt and cope enough, and he was obviously in therapy for many years. And all of that, I think, helped him move forward, and it helped him differentiate enough from his family that he could create a sense of self independently and on his own. And so I think it was a lot of work for him. And I think.
But you're not answering her question, John. You're just continuing with what you already had written down to talk about the Reiner family. That's all you want. You were prepared for the premise that fame and fortune, multi-generational fame and fortune, was at the heart of Nick Reiner's rage. That he had shame because he wasn't famous like Granddaddy Carl. And he wasn't famous like Daddy Rob. That's it. One factor, you are hoeing a row of potatoes, and you're telling that mule, straight ahead, mule, don't look left, don't look right. We're not going to consider that there may be other rows of potatoes, no other factors. The only factor that we're going to blame is the fact that Nick had a dad and a grandpa that were very talented and very successful. That's all we're going to blame it on, John. Is that really the way you do your business? Is that really that simplistic, concrete thought of human being, determinative factors of human being? You really believe that's all people are? That only one factor can explain our very complicated behavior, our excruciating emotions. You think we can only discuss it according to one factor? So I thought this was an interesting moment. Look, the reason that I wanted to do it like this is because this is his topic. This is his topic. This is what he wanted to talk about. He wanted to talk about the connection between shame and violence. He was going to be the criminal psychologist, be the forensic psychologist, right? And yet, when they got it, maybe we're at the heart of why John doesn't want Lauren interrupting him. That he doesn't want her talking or giving her opinion or asking questions because he doesn't want to get caught with his pants down. He didn't know the answer. He didn't know what it was going to take to heal someone dealing with shame. He didn't know what that would take, what that would do. Right? So I thought that was very interesting. I do think shame, as John presented it, as a intergenerational problem, byproduct of affluence and success. I think that is incredibly complicated. And one of my first places that I would start would be to go back to Erik Erikson and consider, at what age does it look like Nick began to struggle a little bit with finding some success activities? Like, when did that start? Is it possible that it started at the same time he started using drugs? You know what? The stories of the number of young people that are killing it. They're doing great. They're athletes. They're making straight A's. They have tons of friends. Like, they're doing great. And then they go to a party and they start drinking, or they try some kind of drugs or whatever. And within a year, they're unrecognizable. They have either quit baseball, or not baseball, but whatever athletic activity they're in. They've either quit it, or they've been kicked off the team. All of their friends have said, dude, you're out of control. We need to get away from you. I don't even know who you are anymore. They get a brand new group of friends, the drug or drinking group. Within a year, they're a mess. Now, according to John, he's only looking at it as granddaddy and daddy are uber successful, and Nick just couldn't measure up. He just couldn't take it. He just couldn't measure up. Well, I would argue back with you. I would say, well, that might be the case. That could be true, but couldn't it also be true that where the place that they lived, they were surrounded by kids, young teenagers, who had a lot of money at their fingertips? And we know this, kids that have a lot of money, they don't always stick with Mad Dog 2020. If they got money, they may start buying Irish whiskey. They have the money and the ability to buy weed that can quickly escalate to pills and heroin. They got the money for heroin. We had an episode in my hometown's history where a bunch of the kids from the high school senior class, these were the doctor's children, the physicians, their kids, the sheriff's child was involved. They were all addicted to heroin. These kids had found it from good families dragging them to church every Sunday morning, right? Suddenly, they're all addicted to heroin. Everybody's going, why is my kid sick all the time? What's happening to my child? Why are they losing weight? What's going on? And then it all came out that they were all using heroin. They all had to go into rehab. It was about 7 or 8 of them. It was wild. It was wild. Okay. So it's not unusual for children of affluence to find very large problems because they have the money to find the large problems. Kids that come from more modest means, the parents are going to recognize that there's $100 gone or $500 gone. The parents are going to say, how the hell did you spend $20 4 hours at the skating rink? What'd you do with $20? What'd you do with $100? You see what I mean? Wealthy families don't notice. Most of those kids are getting like Christmas gifts, birthday gifts of money, gold coins. I know one kid, every Christmas, every birthday, he gets an ounce of gold, like actual bullion. Just goes in the safe. So money is definitely opens doors to wonderful things, and it also opens doors to terrible things. And I don't disagree with John Matthias, his opinion on Shame and Nick's Reiner. I don't disagree individually in a molar fashion. What I disagree with, what I take issue with, is that it's a very complicated, multifactorial problem that ended up with Nick in the condition that he's in. And one of those things may be his physiology. He may simply be schizoaffective, mentally ill. I don't think it's called schizoaffective, John. Please don't say that. That is not correct. It's schizo. So schizoaffective, schizophrenic, in that case, it's biological. And even if Nick had lived the healthiest lifestyle possible, then his symptoms would have arrived when his chemistry changed. So there are many things that could have gone wrong for Nick Reiner that led to this nightmare situation. There's many things that could have happened. His sister was not a golden child. His sister was not like doing great and filled with all acclamation. Oh, she's going to be another Rob Reiner. That was not happening. She was smoking weed left and right. I do think kids of affluence very often find trouble. Even in the best families, when people love their kids, they're paying attention to them, they're trying to help them and monitor what's happening, even in those circumstances. Okay. 1 hour dry floors. Why did you put number 61? Oh, I know why you put number 61. I know why you put, because you're number 61. Thumbs up. Thank you. Blue Jay Lauren seems to have zero self-awareness. Yeah. Well, here's what I think. I do think that Lauren is dealing with shame. I think that the way she wears her emotions on her countenance, right? As he's talking, you see her react. You can see when she's bored and she's like, oh my God, is he going to ever quit talking? Good God, right? Then you see when she sort of perks up. You see when she starts really listening, and then she comes out with a question like, what do you do with that kind of shame? John, are you paying attention? John, you cannot be her therapist. You cannot. Lauren, go get your therapist. Go get a real psychologist who knows what they're doing. Someone not referred by Dr. John. This is sad. It's tough. And we've all been there, right? We've all faced hard times. We've all faced issues related to shame or embarrassment. We've all faced moments of guilt, anger. I've even known rage. look, we're people, we're all living the same parallel lives, and we should be very kind to ourselves, treat ourselves as we would our children or our best friend who was experiencing exactly the same thing. That's the first step. All right. Okay. I got to go because I got a meeting that I got to be in, and y'all are awesome. And thank you so much for being here. And please share my video and please give it a thumbs up. And I'll see you guys later. Let's see. I better do Rainbow Horizons. Where is it?
Woke up at dawn with the pelicans
Later.
in flight. Coffee brewing strong by dawn's early light. Waves whisper secrets to my open heart. The life around this water gets me off to a great start. Parrots wild, squawking loud in the old palm tree. Dolphin smiles, brighter than the Texas sun on me. We chase simple dreams, nothing fancy or grand, just honest days in this promised land. God gives rainbow horizons to those in this happy lane. Diamonds dancing on the waves, back sparkling again. Honest living, a pursuit of peace, family ties.